We will now have the private sector perspective on green growth, the best way forward for economic recovery in the post-pandemic era. And it's an honor and privilege to welcome Mr. R.C. Bhargava, Chairman Maruti Suzuki, who will be in conversation with Davina Gupta, Senior Journalist and Presenter, BBC News. Davina, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ivan, and hello, Mr. Bhargava. Always nice to speak with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I hope all of you are doing well, despite all the limitations.
We're hoping that there won't be any fresh wave of the pandemic and the business will rebound. We've seen some rebound in the auto sector in the beginning of the year, Mr. Bhargava. What's your analysis of the Indian auto sector at the moment? Do we see this rebound as permanent, or is it only a temporary blip and is threatened with this fresh wave of the pandemic?
No, certainly compared to what we have done in the last year, meaning 2021, the industry is doing much better. But that has to be judged in the context of what we have done in the years earlier, which is basically 18-19. Because 19-20 saw the industry dropping by some 18%. And so we are comparing what we call a rebound with a very much lower base, and which is contrary to what normally happened in India. Even with the best of efforts in this year, we will still remain significantly lower than what we did in 18-19. In next year, 21-22, we do hope to cross 18-19, but just a little bit or just be about the same level. So it's not as if it's a massive recovery or something. We're just getting back to what we were before COVID and before the 19-20 debacle of the industry.
But even before going into the COVID, we had seen that slump coming in the auto industry.
Yeah.
Do you see some bright spots, especially now that a lot of people are swaying towards buying their own vehicles, especially in the passenger car segment and two-wheeler segment, because suddenly there's also a scare of going in public transport and because of the spread of the infection. So do we see any fallout of the pandemic which could be beneficial for the auto industry?
I don't think this desire of people to have their own transport is a long-term trend. Because ultimately, it's not very either economical or environmentally sensible for everybody to have a single vehicle and go to work with one person in a car. I mean, even as an automobile manufacturer, I don't advocate that. Yes, people should have cars, but they should use it for going out for families and things. But they should use public transport for commuting to work. That's a more efficient format. So I don't see that trend lasting. And the factors which have caused the industry to decline, and there's been a secular decline over the rate of growth over the last 10 years, I don't see that anything has happened which will reverse that on a sustained long-term basis.
Well, as an automobile manufacturer, you are advocating for public transport. Not sure how your shareholders will hold to that comment, but because you talked about the environment, let me come to the topic that we're discussing today, that is green growth, the best way forward for economic recovery in the post-pandemic area. And I would want to refer to this report by IQ Air Quality, which talks about 22 of the world's 30 most polluted cities are in India. And that's where I want to ask you, because you mentioned in your previous answer as well, what can be done to ensure environmentally sustainable recovery, and how can automobile industry do more, a sustainable business as well, and ensure that there is environmental recovery as well?
You know, it's a little bit of a myth that in India, the automobile, and I mean the passenger car, is a major cause of environmental degradation. It is not. It has been in other developed countries, but the circumstances of the growth of the auto industry in those countries have been very different. They have grown at a time when the strict emission standards of today did not exist. There are countries which have a different environment in the sense that there's not that much dust or anything around. In India now, we are just beginning to grow the automobile industry. We still have a very low penetration of about 30 cars per 1,000, which is amongst the lowest of any country, even in the Asian region. But we are going to grow when we have the best of emission standards available. BS6 has been introduced, both for emission and for safety. And so the growth of the industry and the bulk of the vehicles which are going to be in the market are going to be clean vehicles, or cleaner compared to whatever Europe and America and Japan grew with when they had their automobile boom, even China. So that's one big difference which people have to understand, that let's say 10 years from today, the bulk of the vehicles in India will all be BS6. The old vehicles will have all become either a very small percentage or gone out. So that's one factor which we need to keep in mind. The second is that even with the conditions which exist, all studies have shown that the contribution of cars to pollution is minute. It's between 2 and 3%. The PM 2.5 is 2 and 3%, which the cars contribute. And that is with the old cars which we have had in the country. It's various other things, whether it's the atmospheric dust, whether it is the construction activities, whether it is burning of organic matter, whether it is crop burning, the various lots of things which studies have pointed out. So it's not as if if in China or in Europe, automobiles became the major source of environmental problems, that in India that is true. It's not.
It's one of the major reasons. I'll take your point on that.
One of the very minor reasons.
And as you've said, stubble burning is also a major factor which happens during winter season in most of the North Indian cities in India. But where can more be done? Because do we see, when you talk about the clean energy and clean vehicles, do we see Maruti also going on that route? And the much awaited announcement of an electric vehicle and electric car?
Sure. Government is introducing further norms. The CAFE norms and the RDE norms are coming in. And at the moment, we are finding that the most practical route to bring cleaner cars in the country today is by introducing more and more CNG cars. And we are the major producer of CNG cars in the country. We have the largest portfolio of CNG cars. I think by next year, we'll have about 12 of our models will be CNG. And about 20% of the total sales will be CNG cars. So that's way beyond what anybody is going to achieve for many, many years in any of the other technologies, which is basically EVs. EVs still have a problem, and especially in India. There's a problem of raw material availability. Lithium is not available in India at all. It has to be imported. The sources of lithium are controlled largely by one country. So that's one factor. Cell manufacture for the batteries is not taking place in India. You can't have a massive movement for EVs without somebody making batteries in India. And that's not the role of the OEMs to make batteries. There's no infrastructure for charging. The customer profile in India is very different from the customer profile in Japan or Europe. People there have houses to park their cars. We don't. We have no way of infrastructure unless there is some different infrastructure. And today people have now started talking, and government is also looking at it, that in the long term, is it better to be lithium dependent and have EVs as our source of energy? Or should we start working on other sources like having hydrogen fuel cells and using water as the raw material? And it's a question which I think needs serious study, because environmentally and over the long term, if we can use hydrogen as a fuel, not only for cars, but for a lot of energy needs, that will by far be the most appropriate technology for India.
Hmm. You've talked a lot about sourcing of raw material. I want to come to that as well, because the supply chain that is established and dependent on one country, that's seen some pushback with recent protectionist policies also of the Indian government. But I want to pursue on one point further, Mr. Bhargava, because you mentioned that perhaps it's the infrastructure supporting the electric vehicle market is not right now conducive in India. But when do you see major automobile makers like you moving towards this, or are you finally putting a lid on this plan and moving towards an alternative fuel like a hydrogen fuel car is what you've said, and is experiment or testing going on for that? So which way is Maruti looking to the future when it comes to clean energy?
Hydrogen is still largely in an experimental stage.
Yeah.
And EVs in India are not today acceptable to the bulk of the consumers in India. What is required, we are of course working on EVs, Suzuki is working on EVs along with Toyota. Mm-hmm. But what is required is some breakthrough in technology and in the chemistry of batteries. And I can't predict when that kind of breakthrough is going to come through. But you need that breakthrough, which will possibly have a different raw material requirement for the batteries, which will make the batteries cheaper and which will make the charging of batteries an easier task than it is today. But these are changes which are all technology related, and we have to wait for that to happen. Unless that happens, the EV market in India, as things are today, is going to be small, because whatever manufacturers may want to do, Devina, it's ultimately the customer who decides what is produced and what is sold. It's not the manufacturer.
Customer is the queen, as they say. So
customer is the king, and the queen and the prince and the princess.
So let me come to the point of the supply chain, and that's been in conversation, especially in the last year, because in India, over a quarter of India's auto parts worth over $4 billion reportedly came from China in 2019. And this includes electric vehicle batteries and more that you've been talking about. But because of this pushback against Chinese import, do you think India is ready when it comes to developing its own automobile parts, or will it also impact the recovery or nascent state of recovery that we've seen in automobile industry in 2021?
No, I don't think the automobile industry recovery is going to be held up at all by the policy of government to localize more. In fact, localizing components is very much in the financial and economic interest of the OEMs. We have been aggressively following localization for the last 7-8 years. And I think because of our efforts in the localization, we must be saving each year over $1 billion or more because of reduced imports. So it's not as if this localization effort and what government is talking about localization is related to any political or any such consideration. It is actually required for the stable working of the industry and for some amount of stability also in the cost of the manufacturing. We have had problems in localizing because many of the international manufacturers who have the specialized technology for some of the components which go into the assemblies and sub-assemblies have set up large capacities in countries outside India. It could be China, but it is equally Thailand and Indonesia and Korea and such places. So it's not easy for them to move to India, because then what happens to their investments in those countries? But if the Indian automobile market grows rapidly, and the government is giving incentives today in terms of the PLI scheme and things, it may just make it viable for some of them to come to India. But volume growth is necessary for that.
But do you believe that a signal of protectionism would only hurt the investor sentiment in India and those businesses who want to come to India?
I have never been in favor of protectionism. I've never been in favor of a restrictive trade. But one thing we must remember, if you want to start a new industry in India, and it's an industry which is developed elsewhere in the world, for some 2, 3, 4 years, whoever starts an industry in India will need some degree of support, whether it is in the form of an incentive or subsidy or import duty help. Otherwise, he will never be able to start production in India because costs of production in the beginning are much, much higher.
Yeah.
Volumes have to build up. Then it becomes a chicken and egg story that the Indian consumer of those products will not buy the more expensive products.
It is a price competitive market, definitely.
Because it's not price competitive.
Yeah.
And so they will continue to import. And this local manufacturer will never get going. So their very fine balance has to be struck. And I think that is what the government is trying to do, to create conditions where foreign manufacturers are willing to shift base to India, and for their incubation period till they become viable on their own, they get support here. And that applies to both foreign investors, it applies to Indian investors. Both have the same problems.
But Mr. Bhargava, I want to ask you this question because you've been a former IAS officer, part of the administrative services in India, and transitioned to one of the most iconic brands and helping it in India. A lot of investors, when I speak to them abroad, they are also wary of the business conditions in India. Is the environment conducive to do business in India? And this question is raised time and again when reports of civil liberties are also flashed in the media. We've seen recent arrests of student activists and the pushback on farmers' protests. So the signal is very mixed here for a global investor.
Well, let me put it this way. I'm not quite sure what all these stories about civil liberties in India and becoming less tolerant and all that have to do with anybody's business environment. To my mind, they're totally unconnected. And the so-called anti-liberal lobby or whatever you call it, is not having an impact on anybody's daily lives. Very, very few people. But in India, we have a very open kind of society. Everybody is allowed to say what they please. And I have always wondered that in our priorities in India, where do some of these things fit in with the object of creating more employment and more work and more jobs and more wealth in India? Surely the more important things to talk about is how to create wealth and create jobs in India for millions and millions of people. The civil liberty issues have come up for all people in all places in the country. It's not an issue which I think, but somehow the Western media and some people in India like to play this up. Okay, it's fine. I have no problem with that, but it's not relevant to what we are talking about.
So you're saying that the atmosphere to do business is quite conducive in India. Investors are more than welcome here, and the priority is job creation also for the young generation. And with that, Mr. Bhargava, because I'm running out of time, I would just like to ask you one more question. I appreciate your views, though, on this subject, but the time of crisis has also tested resilience of any brand. And leaders who have been helming companies have also learned valuable lessons on crisis management. If I could ask you this, because you spoke about the messaging part in our previous question, what, in your view, can be done for healthy brand associations, for positive messaging, especially during the crisis that we've seen of the pandemic, and also to overcome the messaging that you mentioned could be problematic for people who view India from outside?
I think the COVID crisis is a temporary matter. Its impact will last maybe 2 years, 3 years, that's it. What is important is that even before the COVID, manufacturing in India was not as competitive as was necessary, because of which jobs are not coming, because business is not being done. Mr. Modi has simplified doing business. But I think competitiveness of manufacturing in India is still not quite there. And that is what I've said in the book we were talking about earlier, about getting.
Yes, I was coming to that. Yes.
So I think it's the business becoming more competitive in India, which is important. It's not this talk about an anti-liberal kind of thing is here, which is, to my mind, doesn't affect 99.99% of the people. It has nothing to do with it. We should all be discussing how do we become more competitive.
So, Mr. Bhargava, in your book, you've talked about getting competitive, a practitioner's guide to India. You've talked about making high quality products at competitive cost to achieve goal of domestic self-reliance. If you can talk to us about where course correction is needed in our policy making to achieve this goal.
I think the one single area which I've highlighted in the book also, and which I think is the most important for us, is that in all our policies, we have tried to achieve industrial competitiveness and also bring about a more equitable socialistic way of living. Now, I'm all for equity in the country. I'm all for a more equitable society. But we have to do that by keeping the two things separate. You cannot make industry competitive if you increase the cost of manufacture by building into the industrial costs certain activities which will lead to socialism. And we have a whole bunch of policies which have been followed right from 1950, which do exactly that. It surprised me that nobody, not only Indian economists, but the World Bank economists, IMF economists, nobody has ever pointed out that how do you get competitiveness if you jack up the cost of industrial manufacturing by all these policies. So I think that is the biggest course correction which we need in the country. We should have social programs in the country implemented. It should not be at the cost of industrial costs going up.
But does that also mean the recent reservation policy that's been sounded by the North Indian state of Haryana of 75% jobs to be reserved for locals? Because that means your labor cost goes up and then your input cost goes up and competitiveness again gets difficult.
Labor cost, but if somebody is wanting to invest in India even, why would he invest in a state where there are restrictions about hiring, rather than in a state where there are no restrictions about hiring? And we have pointed this out to the Chief Minister and the government, that you leave the industry to work as freely as possible. Then industries will compete and come to the most efficient solution. The more restrictions you have, the more difficult it becomes to have proper competition. And that means higher cost.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava, for giving us your time. This has been truly an insightful session. And I must say that it's always nice to speak to a voice of reason in India Inc. and someone who's frank about his views. I do hope that some of your suggestions in that meeting is taken up by the government, and politics is free from business to a certain extent as much as possible. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Davina. Nice talking.
Take care.
Bye-bye.